I'm Natalie, 34, wedged between my nephew and niece at the Thanksgiving table while my family raises glasses in celebration. Everyone gets a toast except me. My brother Wesley for his medical breakthrough. My sister Heather for her journalism award. Even my cousin's new puppy got a mention. After years of invisibility, despite my sacrifices, I've decided this is my last family gathering ever. Just as I stood to leave, collecting my dignity like scattered crumbs, an unexpected knock echoed through the house. A stranger stood there, clutching a yellowed photograph and sealed envelope. Before I continue this story that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from and tap that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened when this stranger turned my forgotten holiday into a revelation that would shock my entire family. Growing up as the middle child between two dazzling siblings was like existing in the negative space of a family portrait. My older brother Wesley showed his genius early, solving complex math equations at 7 while I struggled with basic multiplication. My younger sister Heather possessed an effortless charisma that drew people to her like moths to flame. And then there was me, reliable, unremarkable Natalie. My parents, Richard and Margaret Wilson, never intentionally overlooked me. At least that's what I told myself during sleepless nights. Dad, a respected surgeon, naturally connected with Wesley's analytical mind. Mom, who'd abandoned her own journalism dreams to raise us, lived vicariously through Heather's adventures. I inhabited the awkward middle ground, neither brilliant nor captivating enough to command their attention. School provided no refuge from this pattern. Teachers who'd had Wesley would sigh when checking my last name on the roster. Another Wilson? Are you as bright as your brother? I wasn't. When Heather followed 3 years later, her social butterfly reputation preceded her. Heather's sister? You're so different. I was. Despite earning a scholarship to Northwestern, I chose the local state university when Dad's first heart attack scared us all. Someone needs to stay close, I reasoned, watching my dreams of studying psychology abroad dissolve like sugar in bitter coffee. Neither Wesley nor Heather offered to alter their trajectories. Why would they? Their paths shimmered with promise, while mine seemed negotiable. Wesley completed medical school with honors, specializing in cardiology, a choice that made Dad beam with paternal pride. He married Jillian, a pediatric surgeon with movie star looks and a family pedigree that impressed even my status-conscious mother. Their children, Emma and Jack, excelled at everything from piano to soccer, continuing the Wilson tradition of excellence that somehow skipped my DNA. Heather's journalism career took her to conflict zones and presidential campaigns. Her Instagram showcased interviews with celebrities and global leaders. Each Christmas and Thanksgiving, she'd arrive with exotic gifts and stories that transformed our dining room into a captivated audience hall. Her recent engagement to a British diplomat only added to her mystique. Meanwhile, I built a quiet career as a school counselor. I worked with troubled teens that other educators had written off, finding profound satisfaction in helping them navigate their pain. Last month, one of my former students, a recovered addict, graduated from college and thanked me in her commencement speech. No one in my family attended despite my invitations. It's just so hard to get excited about your work when it's so ordinary, Mom once said, not maliciously but with genuine confusion. Wesley saves lives, Heather reports from war zones, and you talk to teenagers all day. I tried explaining the importance of early intervention, how preventing a suicide matters as much as performing heart surgery. Dad nodded absently, already checking his watch for the evening news. The conversation shifted to Wesley's upcoming research publication before I finished my thought. Depression crept into my life like fog, so gradually I hardly noticed until I was enveloped. I started therapy last year. My therapist Amanda, the first person who truly listened to my experiences without comparing them to my siblings' achievements. Your worth isn't measured relative to anyone else, she'd remind me. And family patterns are powerful, but not immutable. I clung to that hope while dreading each family gathering more intensely than the last. This Thanksgiving marked 15 years since I'd sacrificed my own dreams to remain close to home. 15 years of showing up with homemade pies no one commented on. 15 years of listening to Wesley and Heather receive praise for breathing while my promotions and achievements evaporated into conversational thin air. 2 weeks before this Thanksgiving, a school district in Seattle offered me their Director of Counseling Services position. The salary would double my income. The distance would triple my peace. I decided this Thanksgiving would be my last performance in the role of invisible daughter. After dinner, I planned to announce my departure, though deep down, I wondered if anyone would notice the empty chair next year. I arrived at my parents' colonial-style house at exactly 9:30 a.m., balancing 3 homemade pies and a bag of fresh rolls. Through the kitchen window, I spotted Mom orchestrating the meal preparation like a conductor leading a symphony. Dad lounged in his recliner, newspaper spread across his lap, pretending the holiday chaos wasn't unfolding around him. "You're late," Mom declared when I pushed through the door, though I'd arrived precisely when she requested. "And you've done something different with your hair. It's interesting." I touched my recently highlighted brown locks self-consciously. The stylist had assured me the caramel streaks brighten my face. "Just wanted a change," I mumbled, sliding the pies onto the crowded counter. "Well, change isn't always improvement," Mom replied, turning back to her gravy. Wesley called. "They'll be here at 11. Jillian's bringing her famous sweet potato casserole. You know, the one that was featured in that cooking magazine." I nodded, slipping on an apron without being asked. The kitchen smelled of sage and tradition, a combination that once comforted me but now tightened around my throat like a noose. "Did you hear about Heather's interview with the Secretary of State?" Dad called from the living room. "Made the front page of the Washington Post. Our girl's really making waves." "That's great," I answered, wondering if he'd even glanced at the article I'd emailed about our school's new trauma-informed approach to discipline. The piece had quoted me extensively, a professional high point that evaporated without family acknowledgement. Mom handed me a peeler without looking up. "Finish these potatoes, will you? And try not to make them too lumpy this time. Wesley mentioned last year that Jack doesn't like lumps." By 11, the house transformed into a reception hall for Wesley's arrival. Mom freshened her makeup, while Dad straightened his collar. I remained in the kitchen, peeling, chopping, and stirring. Invisible labor for an invisible daughter. The doorbell's chime sent my parents scurrying to the entrance. I wiped my hands and followed slowly, watching the performance from the hallway shadow. "There's my boy," Dad boomed, clapping Wesley on the shoulder before kneeling to greet Emma and Jack with exaggerated enthusiasm. Wesley, tall and confident in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, embraced our parents with practiced affection. Jillian followed, stunning in a simple dress that somehow looked expensive. Her casserole dish passed to Mom like a sacred artifact. "Let me look at you too," Mom cooed at her grandchildren. "Emma, you're more beautiful every time I see you. And Jack, so handsome and tall. You must be breaking hearts in 3rd grade." The children beamed under the attention shower, accepting kisses and compliments with the entitled ease of those who've never known their worth questioned. "Aunt Natalie." Jack spotted me and waved half-heartedly, already distracted by the promise of cookies Dad was mentioning. "Hey, Nat," Wesley acknowledged, his eyes already moving past me to the football game flickering on the television. "Your sweet potato casserole looks amazing," I told Jillian, who rewarded me with a distracted smile. "Family recipe. 3rd generation," she replied, already moving toward the kitchen to claim prime refrigerator space. By noon, Heather's dramatic entrance completed our family tableau. She swept in with a cloud of expensive perfume, her arms laden with shopping bags from boutiques I'd only seen in magazines. "Sorry I'm late. The traffic from the airport was brutal," she announced, though no one had mentioned her tardiness. "But wait until you see what I brought from Morocco." The living room instantly became Heather's stage, with scarves and exotic trinkets distributed like royal favors. Mom and Dad exclaimed over each item, asking questions that allowed Heather to elaborate on her adventures and important connections. "And for you, Natalie," she said eventually, handing me a small wrapped package almost as an afterthought. "Just a little something I picked up in Marrakesh." Inside was a generic tourist keychain, Nothing like the handcrafted treasures everyone else received. I thanked her anyway, pocketing the trinket while she resumed her storytelling. When Mom announced dinner, the seating arrangement crystallized my position in the family hierarchy. Wesley and Jillian flanked Dad at one end of the table, with Heather beside Mom at the other. I found my name card sandwiched between Emma and Jack in the middle, far from any adult conversation. "Hope you don't mind sitting with the kids," Mom said, not waiting for my response. "We thought it would help keep them settled during the long meal." I nodded, swallowing the protest that formed instinctively. At 34, I was once again relegated to the children's table without actually having one. Throughout the elaborate meal, I attempted to join various conversations, only to find myself repeatedly interrupted or spoken over. When I mentioned my school's new grant funding, Dad nodded vaguely before turning to Wesley. "So, tell me more about this new procedure you're pioneering. Sounds revolutionary." I pushed turkey around my plate, becoming the invisible guardian of children's table manners rather than a participant in adult discussion. The wine poured freely for everyone except me. Mom had forgotten to place a glass at my setting, assuming I'd be too busy with the children to drink. "Aunt Natalie, can you cut my turkey?" Emma asked, and I complied, finding strange comfort in being needed for something, even a task this small. As dessert approached, I retreated to the kitchen under the guise of helping, using the moment alone to collect myself. Through the serving window, I watched my family laughing together, unified in a way that never quite extended to include me. "You've always been the helper," Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, observed, startling me as she entered with dirty plates. "Since you were little, always taking care of everyone else." I smiled weakly, wondering if that's all I'd ever be, the family caretaker whose own needs remained perpetually secondary. The thought of my Seattle job offer suddenly felt less like abandonment and more like salvation. The Wilson family Thanksgiving toast tradition began 15 years ago when Wesley announced his medical school acceptance. What started as a spontaneous celebration evolved into an annual ritual, a verbal family newsletter where accomplishments were announced, validated, and immortalized in our collective memory. "Shall we begin the toasts?" Dad suggested as pumpkin pie slices disappeared from plates. He raised his crystal wineglass, the overhead light catching its facets and sending prism reflections dancing across the white tablecloth. Everyone straightened in anticipation, even the children. Everyone except me, who knew what was coming and braced against the familiar pain. "This year, I'd like to start with my son," Dad announced, beaming at Wesley, who has not only continued his exceptional work as a cardiologist, but has developed a new minimally invasive procedure that's being adopted in hospitals nationwide. The Wilson method, they're calling it. Crystal glasses clinked as everyone except me had something to raise. My water glass remained on the table, my hands folded in my lap. "Wesley, you make me prouder than I can express," Dad continued, voice thick with emotion. "You're saving lives every day and changing medicine forever." To Wesley, the table echoed. I mouthed the words without sound. Wesley stood, accepting the praise with practiced humility. "Thanks, Dad. It's been a challenging year balancing research with clinical work, but seeing patients recover who previously had no options makes it all worthwhile." His speech continued for several minutes, peppered with medical terminology and humble brags about his department's recognition. Jillian gazed adoringly at her husband, occasionally squeezing his arm in support. "And I couldn't have done any of it without my incredible wife," Wesley concluded, prompting Dad to raise his glass again. To Jillian, the woman who keeps our Wesley grounded and somehow manages to be a brilliant pediatric surgeon while raising two amazing children. More clinking, more sips. My water remained untouched. Jillian's acceptance speech highlighted her recent publication in a prestigious medical journal and her department's grant funding. She seamlessly transitioned to praising her children's accomplishments, ensuring Emma and Jack received their portion of family adoration. Emma made first chair violin in the youth orchestra, the youngest ever to achieve that position. Jillian announced, prompting Mom to dab at emotional tears. Emma, sitting beside me, straightened with pride. I gave her a gentle side hug that she barely acknowledged, already basking in the collective approval radiating from the adults. And Jack has been selected for the gifted math program, testing 3 grade levels above his age, Jillian continued, clearly following in his father's footsteps. Jack beamed while Dad nodded knowingly, as if exceptional intelligence were exclusively transmitted through the Wilson Y chromosome. Mom took over next, glass raised toward Heather. To my beautiful daughter, who continues to astound us with her courage and talent. This year, Heather not only won the Preston Journalism Award, but has signed a book deal for her memoirs of reporting from conflict zones. It's hardly war reporting, Mom. Heather demurred with false modesty. Just telling the stories that need to be told. And telling them brilliantly, Mom insisted. Plus announcing your engagement to Christopher, who unfortunately couldn't join us today because he's attending that diplomatic conference in Geneva. Heather's engagement ring caught the light as she adjusted her hair, ensuring everyone noticed the substantial diamond. Chris sends his regrets. He's presenting the British delegation's position on climate initiatives. The toasts continued around the table.
Oncle Robert's promotion.
Aunt Patricia's charity fundraising success. Cousin Stephanie's acceptance to law school. Even my teenage cousin Justin's improved grade point average earned enthusiastic recognition. And to young Tyler, Dad raised his glass to my second cousin, whom I'd met perhaps 3 times in my life, for placing 3rd in his regional tennis tournament. Future Wimbledon champion, perhaps. I shifted uncomfortably as the rotation neared my place setting, my heart pounding with a familiar anxiety. Would this be the year they remembered my existence before dessert was cleared? The moment never came. Mom launched into a toast for Mrs. Patterson's recovery from hip surgery, skipping over me completely as if the space I occupied contained nothing but air. A hot tear threatened to escape, which I disguised by pretending to help Jack with his napkin. Bending down allowed my hair to curtain my face momentarily while I composed myself. "Thank you, Aunt Natalie," Jack whispered, though I hadn't actually done anything helpful. That small acknowledgement from a 7-year-old, the only recognition I'd received all day, nearly broke my carefully constructed dam of emotion. The final straw came when Dad raised his glass one last time. And finally, a toast to Rocky, Stephanie's new golden retriever puppy, who completed basic obedience school last month. Good boy, Rocky. Laughter rippled around the table. Even the children joined in toasting an absent dog, while the human being sitting between them remained unacknowledged. In that moment, something crystallized within me. The Seattle job offer. The apartment listings I'd been secretly browsing. The gradual donation of possessions I no longer wanted to pack. These weren't just idle fantasies, but necessary steps toward survival. I was literally worth less than a dog to my family. As conversation shifted to Christmas plans, I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes dulled by decades of emotional neglect, mouth fixed in a pleasant expression that had become a mask fused to my face. "This is the last time," I whispered to my reflection. "The absolute last time they make you feel invisible." While Mom served coffee alongside the remains of 3 different pies, I quietly opened my purse beneath the tablecloth. My fingers found the folded resignation letter I'd submitted to my principal yesterday, a tangible reminder that escape wasn't just a fantasy. Beside it, I placed the small notepad I'd brought specifically for this moment. In tiny, careful handwriting, I composed what would be my final communication with my family for the foreseeable future. Dear family, asterisk. After today, I won't be attending future gatherings. This isn't a dramatic exit or plea for attention, just recognition that my presence isn't necessary here. I've accepted a position in Seattle and will be moving next month. I wish you all continued success and happiness, asterisk. Natalie, asterisk. The note felt simultaneously inadequate and excessive. How do you summarize a lifetime of emotional invisibility in a few sentences? How do you explain to people who've never seen you that you're tired of not being seen? As I wrote, my mind returned to the Seattle job interview 3 weeks ago. The school district superintendent had actually looked me in the eyes when I spoke. The counseling team had asked thoughtful questions about my trauma-informed approach. For the first time in my professional life, I felt valued for my specific contributions rather than tolerated as a warm body filling a necessary role. "We need someone with your experience and compassion," the superintendent had said. "Your work with at-risk youth is exactly the perspective our district needs." The salary they offered doubled my current income. The relocation package included temporary housing while I settled in. Most importantly, the job was 2,300 miles from this dining room where I'd spent decades disappearing. I folded the note and slipped it under my barely touched dessert plate. No one would find it until I was long gone, probably not until tomorrow, when Mom cleared the last dishes. By then, I'd be packed and prepared to submit my apartment notice first thing Monday morning. "More coffee, Wesley?" Mom asked, deliberately skipping over my empty cup. I checked my watch, nearly 7 p.m. If I left now, I could claim an early shift tomorrow, a believable excuse no one would question or care about. I should probably head out. I announced to no one in particular, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake rumbling beneath my sternum. "Early day tomorrow." "Oh, you're leaving?" Mom asked, seeming genuinely surprised that I'd been there at all. "But we haven't even discussed Christmas arrangements." "I'm sure whatever you all decide will be fine," I replied, already standing and collecting my sweater from the back of my chair. Wesley glanced up briefly from his phone. "Drive safe, Nat." Dad nodded absently, his attention focused on refilling his coffee cup. "Thanks for coming." Heather was deep in conversation with Aunt Patricia about her upcoming book tour, not even pausing to acknowledge my departure. I walked through the dining room with deliberate steps, memorizing details I never expected to see again. The china cabinet with Mom's wedding crystal. The family photos where I always somehow appeared slightly out of focus. The wall markings tracking our childhood heights, where Wesley and Heather's final measurements were celebrated with special stars. No one followed me to the foyer. No one called after me with last-minute conversation or forgotten leftovers. I stood alone by the coat rack, shrugging into my jacket with the strange sensation of attending my own funeral, mourning a family relationship while simultaneously feeling liberated by its end. My hand reached for the brass doorknob, cool and solid against my palm. One turn and I'd begin my new life. One step across the threshold and I'd never again subject myself to this annual ritual of systematic erasure. Just as I began to turn the knob, 3 distinct knocks sounded from the other side of the door. I froze, wondering if I'd imagined the sound, a cosmic interruption of my dramatic exit. The knocks repeated, more insistent this time. Confused, I pulled the door open, expecting perhaps a late-arriving relative or a neighbor returning a borrowed dish. Instead, I found myself face-to-face with an elderly man I'd never seen before. His weathered face carried deep lines around kind eyes, and his silver hair was neatly combed despite the evening wind tousling it. He clutched a manila envelope in one hand and what appeared to be a vintage photograph in the other. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt your Thanksgiving," he said, his voice carrying the slight tremor of advanced age. "But I've been looking for this address for quite some time. Would this be the Wilson residence?" "It is," I confirmed, suddenly aware of movement behind me as family members, curious about the unexpected visitor, began gathering in the foyer. "Who is it, Natalie?" Dad called, approaching with uncharacteristic interest in anything involving me. The elderly man's eyes widened slightly upon hearing my name. "You're Natalie Wilson?" "Yes," I replied, increasingly confused. A smile transformed his face, erasing years from his appearance. "Then my search is finally over. My name is Samuel Garrett, and I was a dear friend of your grandmother, Elaine. Before she died, she entrusted me with something meant specifically for you." He held out the photograph, revealing a black and white image of a young woman with several others gathered around what appeared to be an old-fashioned typewriter. Despite the decades separating us, I instantly recognized my grandmother's eyes, the same eyes I saw in my mirror each morning. "And this," Samuel continued, extending the manila envelope, "is a letter she asked me to deliver to you personally, with very specific timing instructions. By now, My entire family had crowded into the entryway, their collective curiosity momentarily making me visible in a way I hadn't been all day. "Perhaps I should come in?" Samuel suggested gently, glancing past me at the gathering crowd. In that suspended moment between leaving forever and this unexpected interruption, I felt the universe offering a dramatic plot twist to my carefully planned exit. Whether blessing or curse remained to be seen, but as I stepped aside to welcome this stranger into our home, I sensed my carefully constructed escape plan crumbling beneath the weight of my grandmother's posthumous intervention. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside to allow Samuel entry into the foyer. The dramatic exit I'd planned now transformed into something entirely different, a bizarre twist I couldn't have anticipated. "Thank you, my dear," Samuel replied, removing his hat with the courtly manners of a different era. He glanced around at my assembled family, who stared back with undisguised curiosity. "I'm Richard Wilson." My father stepped forward, extending his hand. "Elaine was my mother." "What's this about a letter?" Samuel shook Dad's hand firmly. "A pleasure to meet Elaine's son. She spoke of you often." Mom appeared at Dad's elbow, curiosity overriding her usual reserve with strangers. "Perhaps we should all sit down in the living room? This sounds important." Within minutes, the entire family had relocated to the living room, dessert plates abandoned on the dining table. For once, I wasn't relegated to the edges of the gathering but found myself centered in the impromptu circle, with Samuel sitting directly across from me. "I apologize for interrupting your holiday," Samuel began, his hands carefully cradling the photograph. "I've been searching for Natalie for several months now." "Searching for me?" I echoed, bewildered. "Why?" Samuel smiled gently. "Because your grandmother was very specific about her instructions. This letter and photograph were to be delivered to you personally, not mailed or passed through other family members." "How did you know my grandmother?" Dad interjected, his doctor's scrutiny analyzing Samuel for signs of dementia or confusion. "Elaine and I were colleagues and dear friends for over 40 years, Samuel replied. "Though I suspect most of you didn't know much about that aspect of her life." An uncomfortable silence followed his statement. Grandmother Elaine had passed away 5 years ago at the age of 87. I remembered her as a quiet, dignified woman who made exceptional apple pies and kept immaculate gardens. What colleagues could she possibly have had that none of us knew about? "Colleagues?" Wesley questioned, voicing everyone's confusion. "Our grandmother was a housewife." Samuel chuckled softly. "Is that what you all thought? I suppose Elaine would find that both amusing and sad. Your grandmother was many things, but just a housewife was certainly not one of them." He held up the photograph, turning it so everyone could see the image more clearly. This was taken in 1965 at the Herald Tribune offices. Elaine was one of the few female journalists covering civil rights demonstrations. The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. Mom leaned forward to examine the photograph more carefully. But Richard never mentioned his mother working as a journalist. "Because I didn't know," Dad admitted, looking genuinely confused. "She was always home when I returned from school. She made dinner every night and attended all my baseball games." "Indeed she did," Samuel nodded. Elaine was remarkably adept at balancing her family responsibilities with her professional life. She worked while you were at school, writing under a pen name to protect her family from potential backlash over some of the controversial topics she covered. "What pen name?" Heather asked, her professional interest piqued. "Yale Montgomery," Samuel replied. Heather gasped audibly. "Yale Montgomery?" "The Yale Montgomery who wrote the groundbreaking series on educational inequality. Those articles are literally taught in journalism school as pioneering examples of investigative reporting." Samuel smiled with evident pride. "The very same. Your grandmother was an exceptional writer and a fearless reporter. She continued writing well into her 70s, though her later work focused more on local community issues and human interest stories." I sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this new information with the grandmother I thought I'd known. How could such a significant aspect of her life have remained hidden from her entire family? But why didn't she ever tell us? I finally asked. Samuel's expression softened as he turned to face me directly. That, Natalie, is part of what she explains in her letter. But I can tell you this much. Your grandmother saw herself in you from the time you were very young. In me? I repeated, incredulous. Not in Heather, the actual journalist? In you, Samuel confirmed. Elaine recognized something in your spirit that reminded her of herself, a quiet strength that often goes unnoticed by others. From the corner of my eye, I saw my family exchanging confused glances. The idea that unremarkable Natalie might share special qualities with a woman who'd apparently led a secret life of significance seemed incomprehensible to them. Elaine began planning this bequest about 6 years ago, shortly before her health declined. Samuel continued. She was very particular about the timing, insisting I find you independently rather than going through other family members. Why the secrecy? Dad pressed, clearly troubled by these revelations about his mother. Samuel sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 80-plus years. Elaine had her reasons, which I believe she explains in her letter. It wasn't my place to question them. I promised my dear friend I would follow her instructions precisely, and that's what I've spent the last several months trying to do. How did you find me? I asked. With considerable difficulty, Samuel admitted with a small smile. I knew you worked in education, but had only a general location. I visited 17 schools before finding someone who recognized your name. Even then, I wasn't sure if you'd be here today. It's fortunate you caught me, I said quietly, thinking of how close I'd come to walking out that door forever just moments before his arrival. I was actually just leaving. Then my timing was indeed providential, Samuel replied. Elaine would say the universe conspires to make important connections happen when they're meant to. He leaned forward, extending the manila envelope toward me. This belongs to you now, Natalie. What you choose to share with your family is entirely your decision. That was another of Elaine's specific instructions. I accepted the envelope with trembling fingers, feeling its substantial weight. Whatever secrets my grandmother had kept, whatever message she'd intended for me alone, now rested in my hands. There's more to discuss, Samuel added, including some practical matters concerning your grandmother's foundation, but perhaps you'd like to read the letter first? Foundation. Dad repeated, looking increasingly bewildered. What foundation? Samuel glanced at me, clearly leaving the choice to share in my hands. The power of this moment, suddenly becoming the family member with exclusive information, the center of attention after a lifetime on the periphery, was both intoxicating and terrifying. I think, I said slowly, finding confidence in my voice, that we should all hear what Grandmother Elaine has to say. With careful movements, I broke the seal on the envelope and removed several handwritten pages. My grandmother's elegant script flowed across the paper, beginning with words that immediately brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Natalie, the granddaughter who carries my spirit without ever knowing it, asterisk. The living room fell into profound silence as I unfolded my grandmother's letter. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment, their usual fidgeting stilled by the unusual tension. Would you like to read it privately first? Mom asked, surprising me with her unexpected sensitivity. I considered the option briefly before shaking my head.
No.
I think grandmother wanted her words to be heard by everyone, eventually. We might as well do it now. With a deep breath, I began reading aloud. My dearest Natalie, the granddaughter who carries my spirit without ever knowing it, asterisk. If you're reading this letter, then my faithful friend Samuel has fulfilled his promise to find you. I've chosen this method of communication because some truths can only be properly conveyed after we've left this world, when the recipient is ready to hear them. Asterisk. First, I must apologize for the secrecy that defined much of my life. By the time you were old enough to understand my choices, I had lived so long in the shadows that stepping into the light seemed impossible. Old habits, as they say, die hard, often outliving the people who form them. Asterisk. You've grown into the woman I always knew you would become, compassionate, resilient, and possessing the quiet strength that often goes unrecognized in a world that rewards louder voices. I've watched you from the sidelines, noting how you navigate family gatherings with grace despite being perpetually overlooked. I recognize the pattern because I lived it myself, though in a different era, and for different reasons. Asterisk. While your father believes I was simply a housewife and mother, my life contained multitudes he never glimpsed. The photograph Samuel has shown you offers just a glimpse of my professional identity as journalist E.L. Montgomery. What even that doesn't reveal is the network of educational support initiatives I built over decades, operating quietly alongside my more public writing career. Asterisk. The Montgomery Foundation began in 1972 as a modest scholarship program for disadvantaged students. Over the years, it expanded to include mentorship programs, counseling services, and educational advocacy, all causes I believed could transform lives from the inside out, much as you do in your work with troubled youth. Asterisk. I paused, looking up to find my family's expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Dad appeared particularly stunned, learning about a mother he clearly hadn't fully known. Go on, Samuel encouraged gently. The best is yet to come. I returned to the letter. What gives me the greatest joy, Natalie, is seeing how you've independently chosen a path so aligned with my own deepest values. Without knowing about my foundation's work, you've dedicated yourself to helping the very children we aim to support. Those overlooked and underestimated by systems designed for more conventional success stories. Asterisk. Your work hasn't gone unnoticed, at least not by me. I've followed your career through professional channels, reading your published articles on trauma-informed educational approaches and attending conferences where you've presented, sitting anonymously in the back row, just another grandmother figure no one would connect to the poised young woman at the podium. Asterisk. I've seen you shine in those professional settings, Natalie. I've witnessed the respect your colleagues have for your insights. I've observed the transformation in troubled students who found in you the advocate they desperately needed. While your family may have failed to recognize your unique gifts, please know that others, myself included, have seen and valued them profoundly. Asterisk. I swallowed hard, fighting the emotion threatening to choke my voice. Across the room, Mom had tears streaming down her cheeks, while Dad stared at the floor, his expression unreadable. Now to practical matters. Upon my death, the bulk of my estate was placed in trust for the Montgomery Foundation with specific instructions regarding succession planning. As the Foundation's founder, I've exercised my prerogative to name you, Natalie Wilson, as my chosen successor to serve as executive director, should you wish to accept this role. Asterisk. Gasps echoed around the room. Wesley leaned forward, his expression suddenly intense with interest. Heather's mouth fell open in undisguised shock. The Foundation's current assets total approximately $12 million, with annual grant distributions of nearly $1 million supporting educational initiatives nationwide. The position includes a director's salary of $175,000 annually, along with a deed to my lake house property in Michigan, which I've always intended as your personal inheritance. Asterisk. Whether you choose to accept this role is entirely your decision. The Foundation can continue under its current interim leadership if you prefer to maintain your existing career path. This is not an obligation but an opportunity, one I believe you are uniquely qualified to embrace, though I've instructed Samuel and our board never to pressure you. Asterisk. Beyond these material considerations lies something perhaps more valuable, the complete archives of my written work, journals, and correspondence spanning 60 years. These materials tell the story not just of my professional accomplishments, but of my personal journey as a woman navigating worlds not designed to welcome me. I believe you might find in these pages a kindred spirit and perhaps some guidance for your own path forward. Asterisk. Samuel will provide all necessary documentation and introductions to the Foundation Board, who have been prepared for this succession plan for several years. They await your decision with optimism, having reviewed your professional accomplishments from afar. Asterisk. My darling granddaughter, I regret the years of silence that prevented us from sharing this connection during my lifetime. Family patterns run deep, and I recognize now that my own carefully constructed professional secrecy inadvertently contributed to the very dynamics that have caused you pain. For that, I am truly sorry. Asterisk. Know that you have always been seen, valued, and profoundly loved, if not always by those closest to you, then certainly by your grandmother, who recognized herself in your gentle determination and unwavering compassion. Asterisk. Whatever you decide about the foundation, please accept the enclosed key to my lake house and the separate trust established in your name. You deserve a sanctuary and the freedom to chart your own course, whether that involves carrying forward my legacy or creating something entirely your own. Asterisk. With eternal love and the deepest admiration. Asterisk. Your grandmother Elaine, Yell Montgomery. Asterisk. P.S. Sometimes being overlooked offers its own kind of freedom. From the shadows, we see truths hidden from those standing in the spotlight. Your perceived invisibility has given you insight and empathy that make you exceptionally qualified to help others find their voice. Never doubt that this quiet power is a gift, even when it feels like a burden. Asterisk. I lowered the letter, the final words hanging in the air like suspended crystal, delicate, multifaceted, and impossible to ignore. For several moments, no one spoke. The only sound was Mom's muffled sobbing behind a hastily raised napkin. Dad broke the silence first, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. I never knew. All those years, and I never truly knew my own mother. Few people did, Samuel replied gently. That was by Elaine's design. She compartmentalized her life, quite deliberately. Wesley stared at me with newfound curiosity, as if seeing me for the first time. $12 million? And she left it all to you. Not to me personally, I corrected, finding unexpected steadiness in my voice. To the foundation. There's a difference. Still, Heather interjected, professional interest evident in her rapid questions. Yell Montgomery was a journalistic icon. Did you have any idea, Dad? Any clue at all?
Dad shook his head slowly. None.
She was just
Mom.
She made cookies and tended her garden and listened to my school stories. I never imagined. People contain multitudes, Samuel observed quietly. Especially women of Elaine's generation, who often had to create separate spheres for their different roles. I remained silent, processing the extraordinary revelations. The grandmother I thought I'd known had been watching me all along, recognizing parallels I'd never imagined. While my family overlooked me, she had seen me clearly, valued me enough to entrust me with her legacy. There's a board meeting scheduled next month, Samuel added, addressing me directly. They're eager to meet you, though, as Elaine emphasized, there's no pressure to accept the position immediately. The foundation can continue its current operations while you consider your options. My mind flashed to the Seattle job offer, the escape route I'd been so determined to take just minutes earlier. Now, an entirely different path had opened before me, one I never imagined possible. The lake house is available immediately, Samuel continued. Elaine kept it ready, hoping you might find sanctuary there regardless of your decision about the foundation. A lake house, Mom whispered, clearly struggling to assimilate these revelations. All this time, and we never knew. The family gathering that had begun with my systematic erasure had transformed into something unrecognizable. For once, all eyes were on me. Not with the fleeting attention I'd fruitlessly sought for years, but with a new awareness that contained equal parts shock, recalculation, and dawning respect. In the silence that followed, I felt a strange lightness spreading through my chest, not the desperate relief of escape I'd anticipated, but something more profound. For the first time in my life, I didn't need my family's validation. My grandmother had seen me, truly seen me, when no one else had bothered to look. That recognition, coming from beyond the grave, felt more meaningful than any toast or acknowledgement I'd ever craved from the people gathered in this room. The days following Thanksgiving unfolded like scenes from someone else's life. My phone, typically silent except for work calls, suddenly buzzed constantly with messages from family members who discovered my existence with newfound enthusiasm. Wesley called first, his usually confident voice awkward with forced casualness. Hey Nat, just checking in after all that excitement. If you need help reviewing those foundation documents, I could look them over. Professional courtesy. I thanked him politely, but declined. The documents Samuel had provided were comprehensive and clear, requiring no translation from my suddenly helpful brother. Heather's approach was more direct. "This is such an incredible story. Yell Montgomery as our secret grandmother, and you as her chosen successor. I'd love to feature this in my next book, with your permission, of course." Again, I declined gently but firmly. Some stories weren't meant for public consumption, at least not yet, not when I was still processing their meaning for myself. Most surprising was Dad's call, 3 days after Thanksgiving, asking if I would meet him for coffee. We sat across from each other at a local cafe, two relative strangers sharing DNA and decades of misaligned perceptions. "I've been thinking about your grandmother's letter," he began after our drinks arrived, "about being overlooked and unseen. It made me realize something uncomfortable." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "My mother saw things in you that I completely missed. She recognized qualities I should have noticed and celebrated." He stared into his coffee, avoiding my eyes. "I'm beginning to wonder what else I've failed to see about the people closest to me." "It's not entirely your fault," I offered, surprising myself with a genuine forgiveness in my voice. "I learned to be invisible." It became a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. "But parents should see their children clearly," Dad insisted. "All their children, not just the ones who demand attention." We talked for nearly 3 hours that afternoon, the longest, most honest conversation we'd ever shared. He asked about my work, actually listening to my responses. I described the troubled teens who found their way to my office, the small victories that constituted success in my world. For once, he didn't compare these stories to Wesley's dramatic surgical saves or Heather's high-profile interviews. "You're changing lives too," he acknowledged, just in a quieter way. 1 week after Samuel's appearance, I drove to the lake house that now belonged to me. The property sat on 3 wooded acres overlooking a small private lake, its craftsman architecture blending harmoniously with the natural surroundings. Inside, I discovered rooms filled with books, comfortable furniture, and subtle evidence of my grandmother's previously hidden life, framed press credentials, photographs with historical figures, and awards discreetly displayed in the study. On the desk lay a leather-bound journal with a note in my grandmother's handwriting. "For Natalie, when the time comes to write your own story." I spent the weekend exploring the house and grounds, feeling my grandmother's presence in every thoughtfully designed space. In the lakeside sunroom, I found a collection of newspaper clippings and printed articles, my published work on educational approaches for traumatized students, conference presentations I'd given, even the local newspaper feature about our school's mentorship program. She had been following my career all along, taking pride in accomplishments my immediate family had dismissed. By Sunday evening, sitting on the dock watching sunset colors ripple across the lake surface, I reached a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I would decline the Seattle position and accept the foundation directorship, not because my family suddenly valued this connection, but because the work aligned perfectly with my deepest professional passions. The Montgomery Foundation's mission, supporting overlooked students with academic potential, mirrored my own priorities. The resources at my disposal would multiply my impact exponentially. And the freedom to work from this peaceful sanctuary, away from family expectations and dynamics, offered the independence I'd been seeking without requiring geographic escape. The following weeks brought rapid changes. I submitted my school resignation with appropriate notice. I began virtual meetings with the foundation board, who welcomed me with genuine enthusiasm and respect. Samuel became both mentor and friend, guiding me through the transition with paternal patience. "Elaine would be so pleased," he told me during one of our long planning sessions. "She always said the foundation needed your perspective, someone who understands invisibility from the inside out." Meanwhile, my family underwent their own transformation. Mom called regularly, asking thoughtful questions about my plans. Dad offered practical support without attempting to control outcomes. Wesley and Heather, after initial awkwardness, began treating me with a new deference that sometimes felt like overcompensation but represented genuine effort. I read some of grandmother's articles, Heather admitted during a rare sister lunch. Her writing was extraordinary, and I see echoes of her style in those papers you published on trauma-informed education. I should have recognized the quality of your work before. We all have blind spots, I replied, finding compassion easier than expected, especially within families. 6 months later, the Montgomery Foundation held its annual board meeting at my lake house. Under my leadership, we had expanded our scholarship program to include specific support for students interested in counseling and social work careers. We'd launched a pilot program for trauma-informed educational training in 5 school districts, with promising initial results. As I presented these initiatives to the approving board, I felt my grandmother's presence in the room, not as a ghost, but as a continuing influence, a quiet strength informing my decisions and vision. That Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after Samuel's unexpected arrival, our family gathered again, this time at the lake house, at my invitation. The dynamic had shifted fundamentally. I was no longer the forgotten middle child, but the confident host, a professional peer whose opinions commanded respect. When dinner concluded, Dad raised his glass for the traditional toasts. He began, as always, with Wesley's accomplishments, followed by genuine recognition of Heather's recent journalistic awards. Then, without prompting, he turned toward me, and to Natalie, who has transformed the Montgomery Foundation in just 12 months, expanding its reach to help hundreds of struggling students find their path. Your grandmother would be immensely proud, as am I. The table erupted in approving responses, glasses raising in my direction. For a moment, I savored the acknowledgement I'd once craved so desperately. But strangely, I found it meant less than I'd imagined. The validation that truly mattered had come from my grandmother's posthumous recognition, from Samuel's mentorship, from the foundation board's respect, and most importantly, from my own growing self-assurance. After dinner, I slipped away to the dock, needing a moment alone under the stars. Samuel found me there, his approaching footsteps slow but deliberate on the wooden planks. Quite a difference from last year, he observed, easing himself onto the bench beside me. Almost unrecognizable, I agreed. Though I'm still getting used to being seen. Your grandmother had a theory about visibility, Samuel said, gazing across the dark water. She believed that being unseen forces you to develop sight that others lack, the ability to notice what's overlooked, to value what's dismissed. I nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. The foundation work proves her right. I can identify with our scholarship recipients in ways other directors couldn't. Precisely why she chose you, Samuel confirmed. Your invisibility wasn't a punishment, but preparation. Though, he added with a gentle smile, she would have preferred your family recognized your worth sooner. We sat in comfortable silence, the distant sounds of family laughter drifting from the house. I thought about the journey from last Thanksgiving to this one. From desperate escape plans to purposeful leadership, from craving validation to finding internal worth. I've been wondering, I said finally, whether to tell my students about the foundation. So many of them feel invisible in their own families. They might find hope in knowing that sometimes being overlooked can become a strange kind of superpower. I think that's exactly what Elaine would want, Samuel replied. Using your experience to help others find their voice, completing the circle she began. When we returned to the house, I found my newest scholarship recipient, Alicia, deep in conversation with Heather. At 17, Alicia had overcome homelessness and family addiction to maintain a perfect GPA. She'd reminded me of myself in some ways, quiet, determined, easily overlooked. Natalie, she called, waving me over. I was just telling your sister about my college plans. The foundation scholarship is going to make everything possible. Watching her animated expression, I recognized my grandmother's legacy in action, not just the financial resources, but the profound impact of being truly seen by someone who recognizes your potential. Later that evening, as family members prepared to depart, I stood at the door offering goodbye hugs, a confident hostess rather than the forgotten daughter of previous gatherings. Thank you for today, Dad said quietly, embracing me with unusual emotion. for giving us another chance we probably didn't deserve. Family is complicated, I replied, but worth the effort usually. After everyone had gone, I returned to the sunroom where my grandmother's photographs and my own professional accomplishments now mingled on the walls, a visual testament to the power of recognition across generations. In the stillness, I opened her leather journal to its first blank page and began to write my own story. Not as the invisible middle child, but as a woman standing firmly in her purpose, using former wounds as windows into others' pain. Being unseen had taught me how to see, a painful gift that now allowed me to recognize those the world overlooked. In finding these forgotten ones and helping them discover their voice, I honored my grandmother's legacy while creating something uniquely my own. The journey from invisibility to purpose hadn't required dramatic escape, but rather a deeper form of arrival, coming home to myself and the gifts that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized. If you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued, I hope this story reminds you that sometimes our greatest strengths grow from our deepest wounds. Has there been a moment when you discovered your own invisible power? Share your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we least expect. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to recognize your own unique value, even when others don't.